as possible because it re-energized me and made me feel better. Now, we are really privileged tonight because we have 3 of the activists from the film. And then we have, oh, hang on, we've lost one. We've got 2 activists from XR, and we've got one who's probably going to drop back in a second, I hope. Anyway, for the ones that are here, I'm going to ask the Americans, starting with Abby, alphabetical, I thought, introduce yourselves and talk through your activism. So, Abby, over to you.
My name is Abby Brockway, and I, in 2014, climbed a 20-foot tripod and 4 others locked down to the base, and we blocked a mile-long oil train. At the time, my daughter was 12 years old. I'm a Presbyterian, a small business owner, a wife, and a community member. So that's what we did.
And Bill? Bill, you're on silent.
How's that?
That's it.
All right, cool. Thank you. Sorry about that. So it's nice to meet you all. It's an honor to be here. My name is Bill Moyer. I'm the organizer, co-founder of a group called Backbone Campaign. And we had the opportunity to help organize a flotilla of kayaks to stop Shell's Arctic drilling operation. Yeah, and my first arrest was a long time ago, but I've continued to work with folks around the country on what we call artful activism.
Okay, and Michael?
Hey, I'm Michael Foster, and with 4 other people, we shut down 5 Canadian tar sands pipelines coming into the United States one day before the election, the 2016 election, because we knew then that it really didn't matter who won, that we were in a dire emergency and that neither political party was capable of responding to it. And it turns out that that's still true. So I shut off the Keystone 1 pipeline, and that was a great moment for me, and probably never felt more alive. Wow. And I'm here today speaking on probation. Life on probation has been pretty good, I suppose. And yet, I think I felt freer when I was in prison, where I knew what I was focused on, and out here in the real world, there's just a million choices and nobody seems to know what to do next.
Interesting. Now, UK people, let's start with you, Chidi, then go to Indigo, and then Zoe at the end of the alphabet.
Thanks very much. So my name is Chidi Obihara. I started a few years ago as an advisor to XR, actually a policy advisor. My background is in the Green Party here in the UK. I ran for Parliament, I served on the executive, and my interest has always been the impact of finance on the environment in general, because my background is in banking. I've taken part in 2 actions for XR. One in November of 2019, I think that was, where I presented to a policy committee in the City of London. It was supposed to be a public meeting, but as soon as I suggested that we declare a climate emergency, the meeting was closed down and became private. So I was shown out of the building. The next after that, I rocked up to Barclays in July of 2020 because we had an XR action here trying to stop Barclays from continuing its history of financing genocide and ecocide around the world. I took part in that demo outside their offices here in London as well. And for me, I've never been arrested in XR actions, and I've always been very, very clear that trying to get policy changed is really, really hard. We've been doing it for over a decade, 2 decades, and we haven't moved the dial until XR has shown up on the streets. So demonstrations work. activism works. Nonviolent direct action is always a preferred route. But watching the movie that my three co-panelists were in was beautiful. It was really refreshing and humanizing, and yeah, I'm really honored to be here. Thank you.
Indigo?
Hello, I'm Indigo. I live in London. How did I get involved in activism? A few years ago, probably about a year before XR was kicking off, I was visiting different protest camps around the UK. So there's some, the UK was exploring fracking, so like drilling for oil and gas using acid techniques. There was lots of, like a really big surge of protests against that and direct action against that. And then I went to stay in a camp in the northeast of England where they were fighting a coal mine being built. And like they're just completely seeing people's homes and lives being wrecked by this like awful project just in the name of greed, when we know there's a climate emergency. I was like, right, we need to get something done now. And then yeah, the next year XR was in central London, and it was doing what we were doing, but in the city of London, and the whole world was looking. And since then I've been involved with planning actions and disrupting the city to do what we do.
Brilliantly, I might add. Yes, excellent. And then on to Zoe. Oh, Zoe might be a bit frozen. Oh no, she's there. Are you there?
Thanks, Anna. I hope you can hear me okay. My Wi-Fi is playing up a bit. So if you can't hear me, tell me and I'll put my video off. So yeah, hi everyone. It's an absolute delight to be here and to meet in person the beautiful people from the movie. So thank you, an honour. I'm Zoe. I'm a middle-aged mum from the north of England, and my career history background is originally in the health service in the NHS in this country, and then I've run my own small business for over a decade. I think in terms of why and how I got into XR, etc., I think my soul has always been in activism, but I never made the connection. So I did the kind of soft end of community engagement stuff for many years, and I chaired a local community energy company and things like that outside of day job, and whilst being a mum and running a business and working and blah blah blah. And yeah, a lot of different things happened in 2018, and I discovered XR, and I couldn't run fast enough towards the movement, basically, and it just felt like what I've been waiting for 30 years. So got involved straight away, and I've been involved in, I think, all the main rebellions and a number of smaller actions. I've been arrested 3 times, and plan to keep going. I don't think there's any alternative, and it feels absolutely the right thing to do.
Yeah, but oh, and just to let everybody know in the audience, Liz here is our technical partner, so she's helping make all of this work. Okay, so I think where I wanted to start with people, which we've covered a little bit, is how you get to the stage where you commit to doing above and beyond, and how you get to a stage where actually you can't really choose to do anything else. I thought maybe I would start with Michael and Michael's journey because it was a very deadpan and very practical and very bold action that you took part in.
So it's a long journey. It started in high school. I can't go back that far. The events along the way, you know, after learning that we were making our planet uninhabitable, having kids, raising kids, working with kids, planting trees to get a trillion trees in the ground so that they might be able to live out this century okay. And that's just part of it, because, oh yeah, we also have to stop burning all the fuels that allow us to plant these trees. you know, and working with them all the time, working with the governor who betrayed these kids. He was the climate candidate in the presidential election. And he absolutely, he was, a group of kids sued the state of Washington for the right to a habitable climate. They won. It was the first time in the US that the courts directed the government to fix climate for living citizens. It was an amazing historical event. The climate governor raised money off of these kids and then cut the legs out from under the case any way he could to make sure that he would never be forced. It would never be enforced. That radicalizes a person. So yeah, and Standing Rock was going on at the same time. I mean, there were people who spent more time in prison than I did. Brown-skinned people certainly spent more time in prison than I did for doing a heck of a lot less than what I did. And as far as what we did, we have to actually disrupt something. We can't just stop traffic. We have to stop the flow, the production and the transport and the distribution of the fuel. The fuel is the thing. So for us, it was about how can a handful of people stop as much fuel as possible? Yeah.
And looking back, what was the impact of that, do you think?
That's a really tough question for me to answer because, you know, we stopped about 15% of what the US consumes in a day.
Wow.
And we stopped that for a few hours. So even though I know that, you know, my little hands turned off the Keystone 1 pipeline and it felt amazing, I also know that 8 hours later it started again. So what was wrong with our plan was that we weren't persistent. We weren't there the next day and the day after that and the day after that. You have to keep, we have to disrupt, stop the flow and keep coming back until either the system breaks or somebody says, uncle, somebody says we give up. Because they're never gonna agree to this. I mean, ending slavery in the US is probably the closest metaphor that we have to this. And, you know, John Brown, we know the name, but he failed and was executed. And there was no army of John Browns following him to make that happen. So it took a civil war to end slavery. And look at, and we just had the Derek Chauvin trial. And so now everybody's celebrating because, you know, maybe if a Black person gets murdered on live stream, maybe the person who murders them might face charges and go to jail. That's what we're celebrating. So we got a long way to go on ending fossil fuels immediately. And yes, we are totally out of time. It was totally an emergency in 2015, 2016. And now what we have to do now, you know, is like 25% cuts every year, period. And will we see 1 trillion trees in the ground? Will those trees live long enough to take carbon out of the air? Nobody knows. So what did it mean that we stopped the oil? Was it real or was it performative? I still don't know the answer. I think it inspired a lot of people to take action. We were willing to risk years and years, 20, 21 years in prison. But yeah, we're gonna have to be able to do that every day.
Yeah, I think that's something I'd quite like to explore a little bit, because I think that when you guys in the US go and do your law breaking, you're dealing with police people who are armed and dangerous and even capable of shooting people by mistake. Whereas here in the UK, you've got less chance of getting beaten up, certainly if you're white. I don't think those chances apply if you've got non-white skin, let's put it that way.
And that is true in the US too,
yeah,
which we were very aware of when we took our action.
Yeah, so in the UK, XR has been called out for being everything. I mean, we've been called out for absolutely everything, but the one that hurts the most is that we're all white and middle class, because that just has us in agony on the floor. But the truth is, it isn't the same deal for everybody getting arrested, is it, Chidi? From, you know, you've said you haven't been arrested. I haven't been arrested either. But also, you're just going to get a different deal, aren't you? I mean, and that's why we don't have as many people of colour in the front line, because they get most of the rubbish. Any comments that you've got? Anything you'd like to say on that, Chidi?
Sure, no problem. Thanks very much, Michael, for that excellent response. And thanks, Anne. So my background has been policy based. So I got into it from the point of view of politics and actually arguing about what the government is supposed to do. And that gap between, you know, the duty of government in general to protect the citizens and to regulate corporations. And the reverse that happens, which is we have governments now who protect corporations and regulate individuals. And the fact that in regulating individuals, respecting our human or environmental rights just falls all the way down the priorities of the governments that we have, it appears. But when you add, I think, the added layer or complication of race onto it, and sometimes gender and orientation, the state does treat you differently depending on who you are. And we are lucky, as Anne said, that we live in a country where armed police are less common in Britain than they are in the States. I got a chance to work in New York for a while, and I have to tell you, the sheer unmitigated terror of being surrounded by policemen who are carrying guns when you come from a country where policemen don't normally carry guns is difficult to describe. But even having said that, I mean, I'm very aware of the fact that I'm 6 foot tall, I'm a black man, I'm standing in a sea of people who are younger than me and look differently from me. So I stand out even more. And I need to be aware constantly of how I behave, how I'm perceived, and know that I'm judged to a different standard. Having said that, I'm always really grateful to people in the movement around me, because I've seen acts of sacrifice where people have used their privilege in ways that were just so incredibly brave. You know, I've seen, you know, older than me, much older people than myself, who are not physically strong or firm even, getting arrested and taken away by the police. And I know, and this is the beauty of the film that you guys made, I know that we all have that secondary layer of other people who suffer, you know, because at home there are parents, spouses, children, friends, relatives who suffer when one person is arrested. And I'm a dad, and you know, my mom's elderly, and I have all those connections as well, but it exists right across the movement. And that was, in my opinion, one of the most wonderful things that your film established. It humanized us and explained that in fighting for human environmental rights, we might seem outlandish, but we are connected. You know, we're all connected.
Yeah, I think for me, that's partly what made me so excited. It was seeing people who had come to the same conclusions, but completely independently on the other side of the world. And also, I think Joe Gantz's sympathetic portrayal, especially that thing about family. So I'm going to come to you, Bill, because as we were watching the film, I was sitting on the sofa with my partner, and you said, I commit to making breakfast for my daughter every day. And I just looked at him and said, I can't commit to that. So, yeah. And also Abby and Zoe, I mean, you know, I've got one 12-year-old. And how do we do this? How I got told off, actually. I saw my mum for the first time last week, went up with the grandson, and on the way out, she said, you can't be talking about the end of the world all day in front of him. You've got to stop. And, you know, none of us have seen our parents so much, have we, because of the lockdown? You need that kind of thing. So how do we sort of engage our families into it? And also, how do we talk to our friends? I don't know if I've got any friends here tonight, because I have pushed this on social media. For some of them, it's so hard to start talking to them about it. they're really wrapped up, they're successful in their capitalism, they're a bit stretched at work, but apart from that, they're doing quite well. How do you start talking? I thought this film might be a groundbreaker. So Bill, let's start with you and families and friends and how to talk to people.
Yeah, you know, it's an interesting story, or that's an interesting theme for me. I remember being a student activist in the 80s and telling my roommate, who was a longtime friend of mine, you have to come down to this lecture. And he said, no, I don't have to. You have to, but I don't have to. And I thought that was very instructive. So, I actually think that it doesn't do us a lot of good to tell other people what they need to do, what they have to do. I think it's better to act from a place of integrity and beauty, and then do things in a way that people identify, that is enrolling, so that people identify your actions as representing their values or their vision. I never dragged my daughter to protests. You know, I thought she'd just turn out the exact opposite if I did that. But she's not the exact opposite. She turned out really awesome. She's an incredible human who is very inspiring to me and challenges me to be better and go further. So I really am not into enrolling people with guilt or shame. I'm honestly not even that into scaring people to death. I think that a social movement is relational, and one of my areas of study is art of war applied to nonviolent social movement. And even when we think we're losing, sometimes we're winning, right? When the Fennica, the ship, the icebreaker for Shell, went through past our kayaks in Portland, people, felt defeated, but in reality, they had just achieved a victory. There are things called domains of conflict. There's like attrition conflict, that's with a symmetrical power going against each other. There's maneuver conflict, it's like surprise and fade away to get out there and use techniques like special things like Greenpeace does. And then there's moral conflict, which is the domain where it's about enrolling others, because our power is fundamentally moral power. And what stopped Shell's Arctic drilling, at least in part, was not the kayaks in front of them. It was the sympathies that those kayaks and those actions awoke in the public around them, so that the Shell realized that the what do they call it, the regulatory uncertainties, which related to policies and regulations and that sort of thing, that we had won the moral conflict around Arctic drilling. So I resist using these other techniques for bringing people in. I want to enroll people by feeling like whatever we do is a manifestation of our deepest aspirations and values.
I think that's brilliant. I love that. Abby and Zoe and Indigo, in fact, because just before we started streaming live, Indigo, you were saying you were really touched by some of the family and friends stuff, and so it is that thing of like, we're all in it, but we've also got to expand it. We've also got to be able to relate to the world around us. Any thoughts on that, Zoe?
Oh, thanks, Anna. Yeah, I really related to these aspects of the film as well. Gosh, very much so. And I kind of can connect with what everyone said. You can't move people much faster than they can go. I mean, you can accelerate the process a bit, but they can only go as fast as they can go. And often we are involved in this stuff because we have come from a different place, or a different insight or something in us from an early age or whatever. And so I know with friends and family, it can be really, really challenging. I've got a teenage daughter as well. And I try not to lecture too much at home. Definitely try not to do that, because I agree, Bill, it has the opposite effect with kids, doesn't it? I know things had the opposite effect with me when I was growing up, so things have the opposite effects. And yeah, she's an inspiring young lady in her own right, and has her own views on how to change the world in different ways, and that's to be respected. I'm very lucky in having a very supportive partner who's I've been dragging along on the journey with me, and he's really supportive, and I couldn't do a lot of this without that, because I think it'd be incredibly hard. I think friends are a whole nother kettle of fish. They're all at their different places, and we've often accrued friends through our lives, through different parts of our story, and we've got different things in common, and some friends are wholeheartedly in this, and some friends you just can't even have that conversation with, and I'm sure everyone can identify with that. So but in terms of the wider movement, and I think I like your point about the moral victory, Bill. I think a lot of people can identify with that. We just take away the social license for these agents to operate, and it's like, oh yeah, that's just we are herd animals at the end of the day. We're social creatures. And it's like we just have to get to that social tipping point, don't we? Where it's just not socially acceptable to do that anymore, and those moral victories really help with that.
And Abby, your daughter, so she was 12 when you did your action. So what is she now, about 14, 15?
She's 19. So it happened in 2014. The trial was 2016. And my family, so there's the three of us, my husband and my daughter are similar. And really my job, I felt as a parent, was to win the hearts and minds of my family first. So that was really difficult. And I did encourage my family to come to things that I cared about, not always, but when deciding what to do for fun, we did a few things my daughter would like to do, and then it was my husband's turn, and then it was my turn. And so they did show up with me and see what it was like. But my daughter had resentment. I went to a lot of evening meetings, and the trial was very stressful for my family. And after the trial, both of my daughter came up to me and said, please do not get arrested until I'm 18 again. Just please make me that promise. And so I kept that promise, but she's had to learn from me, and I hope I've taught her that when you believe in something, and you go all in, just, I'm trying to be a model for her to take risks and question authority. I just remember when she was probably 8 years old, we went to a march, and she said to me, Mom, is there a permit for this march? And I said, I don't think so. And she was really upset that I was walking in the street, and she, my daughter and husband decided to walk on the sidewalk along with me. But she didn't want to cross that line. And I would say she is not like me. And I think it's a lifelong process. I think she respects me now and understands me, and definitely knows the what's happening now, and is very aware of the struggle that her generation has to live with, and is a little ticked off about it, that that her generation has to deal with it.
Okay, Indigo, you spend a lot of time thinking about how things are going to work, how actions are going to work, how are we going to engage people, more people, do you think?
Good question. The $1 million question, isn't it?
Yeah.
the whole future of everything question. I think we have to start every meeting grounding ourselves in the scale of the crisis and the new science that's coming out all of the time, and not just saying that and looking at it as numbers. We then have to emotionally connect with that grief, with the it's so difficult to even try and tap into that feeling, but when you've actually got, God, the scale of what's going on and the natural disasters, and then the impact that's going to have on humanity, and then connecting with that. And then we need to plan things thinking about what action is proportionate to the scale of this crisis, like not what's in our comfort zone. And then that's when we're going to feel like we're actually engaging with the fight and actually engaging with the problem. And that's when you, like people were saying before, hope, that's where hope ends and action begins. And you like can start to cast away these ideas that everything that we do is useless, and you're just going to dive into that pool and just say, right, let's just keep this going. And I think when we've got that conviction, then we're going to be able to mobilize more people. And if we start trying to go for these small wins all the time, well, it's not sexy, it's not fun, so no one wants to join us. And so I think, like personally, from my perspective, actions are what is mobilizing. Yeah. And then, well, having really great people who are prepared to outreach and talk about and engage people with that action.
I think that was brilliant, actually, a very inspiring answer. But also, you know, it's not a time for small gestures, is it? It's 2021. We're over deadline. We've been talking about climate change being in 30 years, for 30 years. Bingo, we're here. And there are days, I'm sure everybody has days when they think, oh, fuck this, it's got to be somebody else's turn to save the world, right? I have had enough today. And you think, oh, I'm just going to give up. And anyway, maybe I've been radicalized, you think, and kind of wish that you could unradicalize yourself. And then you just look around and it's snowing in Texas and you're like, oh, fuck, I'll have to get back on it, won't I? Because it's just happening. So, you know, this is a big year. Biden and the 40 Thieves, they're meeting tomorrow. I printed out the names. I'm not going to read them all, but they're all there. Arty Farty had a party. There they are. They're going to talk each other into, they're going to pretend it's a negotiation. They're not going to come in there and go, we've got this problem, guys. We've ruined our world. How are we going to stop it? How are we've got this year, we've got to do it. It's not like we've got, like, you know, NGO a clock, loads of time. How are we going to support them enough to give them the confidence to keep going, but push them much harder to go places they don't even think they need to go to yet? And that is the balance, because if we just slag them off, then you know, the oil men will pay them, you know, and the oil men's already own them. So you know, I'm glad we've all met because we've all got the same thing in mind, but the odds are stacked against us. The other guys have got all the money and all the tools. So how are we going to do it? And that's a really tough question. I don't know why I put it out so tough. But Bill, talk about your, I love your political calculus thing. I just love it because it's very like some of our theory of change.
Yeah, well, thank you. You know, first of all, I think some people say that it's the work of activists to make the invisible visible. So, you know, building on what Indigo was speaking about, I'd say that is, you know, and doing that in the most dramatic and beautiful and powerful way we can, and not getting, is part of it. And it's also to make the impossible inevitable and the inevitable impossible. So, and that's about shifting the momentum of the society. And I don't think of this as just like a policy fight. My experience around this and any number of the intersecting issues and crises that we deal with are part of a paradigm struggle. They're part of a paradigm battle, a paradigm where fundamentally everything's for sale, and versus a paradigm where nothing of ultimate importance is for sale. And those two battles, that battle is, I think, at the foundation. And so when I think about political calculus, or I've heard about, you know, I heard about that term bantered around. And then I was trying to figure out, like, I never had to take calculus. So I was asking my brother on this really long road trip. And like I joked about, you know, you only get to ask somebody what is calculus on a very, very long road trip when you've run out of every other thing to talk about. And he said, calculus, oh, that's easy, Bill. Calculus is the mathematics of changing variables. Well, okay, apply that to our situation. We know some people also think of politics as the art of the possible. So as change agents, and in this case, we're talking really just about activist campaigner change agents, but that's not the only kind of change agent. But activist campaigners, we need to make the invisible visible, and we need to shift what is politically possible by changing the variables, by toxifying the bad actions, making the exposing the how the paradigm of profit with impunity is threatening, as the enemy of life and our well-being and our joy and the sacredness of this journey, and celebrating the sacredness of the journey. People fight for what they love. People defend what they love. So connecting to what we're for and celebrating what we're for, and drawing people into the battle of paradigms by appealing to what is immediate and that they love, to me is very key to shifting the political calculus from making the impossible possible, or the inevitable impossible, and winning for our side. And I think the last thing I just like to close with on that is that I think the beauty of the Shall Know opportunity that we had in Seattle and in Portland was that this very far off thing, this oil rig, this symbol of Arctic drilling and climate change, was issues that are very intangible and difficult to get our heads around and feel like we can have an impact on, were all of a sudden smack dab right in the middle of our community. And we got to be on the water, the place that we love, defending what we love, connecting that dots to the bigger harms of climate and this offense to what we all ultimately hold as sacred.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant. And I think we've got to be able to show people, so not just that everything in the future is going to be a sacrifice. There are going to be so many gains in the future, in a world where everything isn't for sale, where you can reestablish trust. One of my favorite quotes at the moment, and lots of people in the rebellion aren't going to like me for this one because it is an Ed Miliband quote, and he's not my favorite person either. And he was just like, Martin Luther King didn't say, I'm having a nightmare, did he? He just said, I have a dream. And it's kind of, people will go towards stuff. And yes, you've got to frighten them a little bit into action, but they will go towards stuff. Now, we've got a question from the floor. We haven't got that much longer, so I'll do this question from the floor, and then we'll have a little wrap up from everybody. So Bernie Frankel would like to know from Michael, Bill and Abby, if they were happy about how their actions got reported in the media. We've got a very problematic media in the UK that's becoming increasingly problematic, I would say, especially as one, like the BBC pretends it's the voice of truth, which is really tricksy. How did you feel, and would you have done things differently with hindsight with media portrayal? I'll take that to Abby first, then Michael, then Bill.
Well, I've been on many beautiful actions that had no coverage, and I feel like it's at the mercy of whatever the news cycle is. So if it's a slow news day, then possibly your action will get covered. But for the Delta 5 action that we were involved with, it got way more coverage than I ever had expected. And the funny story is that when Liz and I were the women that were in the jail together, and we woke up in jail the next morning, and we were at the table eating, and the women asked, so what are you here for? And we said, well, there was this climate action that happened yesterday. And they said, oh my gosh, we read about it in the paper. And they had the newspaper laying there, and they passed it all around, and there was this buzz, and they were so proud of us and so excited to meet us. And so we didn't even know that was in the newspaper at the time, because we were still in jail. So it was very surprising and connecting to the women that we were in jail with.
And Michael?
Yeah, there was very limited coverage. I think one of the proudest moments I had was that there was a question in the White House briefing room the next day about the vulnerability of oil infrastructure in the country. And, you know, the spokesperson dodged the question and that was it. But as far as media coverage, you know, there were a couple of, you know, kind of portrait pieces about the activists, and it was pretty limited. So yeah, we stopped 15% of the nation's oil consumption for whatever, but you know, it wasn't news.
But now here we are, global film release.
There you go.
There
you go. Thank
Bill?
goodness for Joe and yeah.
Yeah.
Bill?
Well, I don't think that there's that wasn't an issue for the Shell No and project. And you know, the fact, one of the things that that we did is we knew that people couldn't imagine themselves blockading. If we just put out the call, come and blockade this thing on this date, they wouldn't have shown up, right? We had to like kind of trick them into playing. And so we flew a giant balloon and said, join the flotilla. And the news coverage, news covered that. And while the news was covering it, we said, hey, by the way, there's going to be a training on Thursday. And so then the news came down, the reporters came down to the training. And then there's this escalating series where we built this story where the media was always present and helped do our recruiting for us. I would say, building on again what Indigo had brought up earlier, is the importance of doing something that's audacious. I think doing something that's bold and audacious and surprising and that resonates with people is super powerful for getting media attention. You can also get it by connecting global issues to local, or local action to global issues. So, you know, don't forget to make sure that the climate impact has a local impact or a corporate national crisis. There's the collusion between corporate elected power manifests in local places, and use those as modes of attack. I just want to also say that I really agree with your idea around the yes. And what I've been telling folks is in our movement is our no is only as powerful as our yes is compelling. So that we leading with vision is important, and making that, you know, we've lost a lot of people through to the right from globalization. And we could, I think, be appealing to relocalization and what people love and making a material difference in their lives as part of our work. And the last thing I'd say is that I like to think of rebellion as a muscle that needs to be exercised. And like people said early on, we bring people along from where they're at, but we also increase their ability to do it by doing it, like as we do for ourselves. Check.
Yeah, well, I would definitely say there's such a thing as a rebel journey. I think people get more confident and they understand more. Indigo, just because we've got you here, like, talk about some of the actions that you think have worked, you know, some of the ones that have inspired you or that you have been really pleased with, because, you know, there are so many things, like you were saying, Bill, go bold. So obviously there was a pink boat in Oxford Circus. That's just mental, right? So that struck with everybody because it's mental, but there's been so many others. You know, one of the other ones that I thought was really great was the house floating in the Thames. And lo and behold, a year later, it was actually happening in Australia. Like, wow, amazing. So yeah, just talk us through some of your personal favorites, your greatest hits, Indigo.
You asked what has worked, but basically we're still doing it because none of them have worked yet. So, but the things that have like helped, like I've watched mobilize people and have sparked like conversation like across the country is, yeah, like you say, XR kicking off blocking 5 bridges. To begin with, that was like really big news. Like the bridge is the sort of main artery of the city, so you block that off and it's massive. And then April and then October, so these big rebellions where we can say to everyone, come and play your part in this rebellion, whether you're washing the dishes or sitting on the street getting arrested. Like, that's what we need to do, this groundswell of people, this huge people. And then when you have a smaller number of people, like last week, for instance, there was a group of women who went and broke the glass of Barclays headquarters in Canary Wharf. So like that is one of the like centers of global capital, and there they are committing criminal damage like against a system which is creating like a violence and a damage which is far greater than any bit of window smashing can be. And that's really like pushing us to think about what actions we can take and what we can keep doing. Other amazing actions, yeah. Oh, Zoe, maybe you can think of some more. Zoe?
Oh, thanks, Indigo. You've given a great list there. I think I just add the incredible press action from last September's rebellion. It was an absolute standout. It was national because it was southeast and the northwest, and again a beautiful example of a fairly small number of rebels bringing a piece of national infrastructure to a halt. You know, stopping that right-wing media getting out the next day, and it's led to so many repercussions. And brought the reaction right out of the system by poking it right in the face. So free the press. Awesome.
Yeah, no, I think that one was absolutely brilliant. And also it's always the next one, isn't it? The answer is the next action. Because you've always got to go one better and you've always got to go one further. Now we've got one more question and then we haven't got that much longer. So for everybody to have a little wrap up, maybe this is the question to do it. So this is from Jane May Morrison. And she said, what are your hopes for and your advice to your fellow activists for Glasgow COP26? But this is, I think it's expanded really. This is the year, it's now, we've got to do it now. I'm going to start with you, Chidi, because I know that you've got a specific plan in mind and you're launching something for COP. So talk through that and then let's just all talk about our hopes and energies for this year. Chidi.
Thanks very much, Ian. And thanks again to all my previous contributors, especially Bill, who talked about ways of making what we describe as, an Overton window, just creating just a gap in space and time where there are new possibilities. People feel as though they can walk in a different direction, they can think in a different way. And I think we are there, certainly in the UK, because this is a really unusual year in which the UK leads both the G7 and COP. So the G7 in June, COP in November, and it's a year in which painting a picture of where we want to go, painting that destination of what we can actually achieve, which in my opinion is also partly about policy. But one of the things that we've done, my team and I, is we put together, I put it in the chat, a website, COP26climateactionplan.com. And in it, there are 4 pages of, research and science. But in summary, we're asking all of the 196 signatories to the Paris Agreement to end all new fossil fuel financing at the end of this year. Just stop. Just keep it in the ground. One of the hashtags we're using is stop digging. So simply stop. I think that having that kind of policy to coalesce around, if we can all go to big government, to the Biden 40, for example, and say, we don't like what you're doing. We know you guys have had lots and lots and lots of conferences while the Keeling curve has gone up and up and up and up. And we're asking you to do just this one thing, okay? You have one job. Your job is stop all new fossil financing dead at the end of this year. If we can coalesce around something like that, then I from my perspective, in talking to my kids, in justifying my behavior to my mom, it makes it worth it, right? Because this is what we're fighting for. This is what I'm fighting for. So if anybody's interested in finding out more, please go to the website. It's in the chat. It's fairly self-explanatory. It's the COP26climateactionplan.com. I hope it's helpful and inspiring for people. Thank you.
Brilliant, Chidi, thank you. Right, let's go across to the other country. Let's go to Abby.
I think I'll just pass and let other folks chime in. I'm just excited for the young people. I'm going to follow them, and I will do all I can. This is such an inspiring panel. I want to get more creative in action.
Okay, Zoe?
Yeah, gosh, you could do a PhD, although there isn't time to do a PhD on this question, but it's a big question, isn't it? I think Michael's going, yeah, no, there's no time. I guess so more and more reflecting on the ecosystem of change. And, you know, we know we are nature ourselves, and we have a complex ecosystem of change, and we need a whole range. There's not going to be one. There's not going to be one action that will tip it over in the positive tipping point. That it's a whole complex ecosystem. So I think there's actions like Chidi's just described. There's you know, in the UK audience may know that we've got the Climate and Ecological Emergency Bill, which provides you know, a science-based legislation which could offers the government a roadmap, but of a kind of high-level roadmap, and they, even if they don't take that, it pushes the conversation. We need lots of spiky actions to tag the edge of that Overton window. So we need to keep stretching that Overton window so that the acceptable conversation moves more and more, because we've tagged that Overton window further and further in the direction it needs to go. And I think because of the moment that we are in right now politically in this country as well, we need to absolutely join in love together with the movement of movements against the policing bill and the slide to fascism and all of these interconnected issues. And we need to really speak to all that interconnected issues and come together with a much bigger movement, which is beautiful and really starting. So I don't think there's any one thing, and I think it's almost a dangerous thing to think there is one thing that is the answer. We need to just allow this blooming of this beautiful moment and sort of ride the wave of it, I think. I don't have a better answer than that, Anna, sorry.
No, that was a pretty good answer. You can have a highly commended for that one, yeah. Michael?
I'm a little bit like Greta or Roger. I tend to say just read the science, because you have to know that everything coming out of Joe Biden's mouth and anybody else who's elected, they cannot say in public what has to be done for us to survive, because they won't be elected anymore. So because the House is basically almost burned to the ground, and everything we're doing to be successful and go to work and go to school is what's causing it. So so I want to kind of stick with like that, you know, just make sure everybody is aware, because, you know, Madison Avenue advertising, Wall Street, they're gonna get their greenwashing across, and it's gonna be stronger and stronger every year as the wildfires and the hurricanes get bigger. So that's critical, is that people have to read and understand the science, that we are completely out of time. 25% cuts a year is a lot. That's crazy. Nobody can say that in public, but that's not going to be true next year. Next year, we're going to need like 28% cuts a year. We're at the dead. We passed the dead. This is not, you know, something that political leaders can handle. So the one thing that I keep going back to is that in the 90s, when we first started having conferences, the industry was really careful to make sure that we talked about fossil fuel emissions and not fossil fuel production. We lost the battle there in the 90s. We cannot pollute. We cannot individually. It is immoral. It is like, you know, turning on the gas chamber or whatever. We cannot do it. And yet, if that's true, then how can oil companies, coal companies continue producing? It's nonsense that we haven't outlawed production. New production of any kind should be banned, outlawed. It can't be market-driven solutions. Market-driven solutions will never get us there. If the oil rigs were to dry up that we've already tapped, I think it cuts emissions about 6% per year. And that's a heck of a lot better than what we're doing right now. a heck of a lot better than anybody's talking about doing. So at least banning, making illegal any kind of production, limiting the supply. Same thing with planes. I live near Boeing. If Boeing made enough planes to make sure we got to zero emissions by 2030, how many more new planes would Boeing make? That's a trick question. It's zero.
Yeah.
So, you know, how many more new planes does the world need for everybody to get to grandma's house? So anyway, that's kind of my answer, is that we have to come at it the other way around, because the market solution, we can't do it the other way we've been doing it.
Brilliant. Thank you, Michael. Indigo.
This has been such an interesting conversation. Yeah, it's really great to meet you guys. What is it? It's about how do we get to, what are we going to do in the run up to COP? Well, I was born 94, then 95, I think there's the first COP conference, and that globally that year we had 6 gigatons of carbon into the atmosphere. Then I think 2018 is 10 gigatons. So what are we waiting for with COP? Like, COP's not going to cut it. COP is fucked, basically. But like, the kind of hopeful thing that I'm feeling from tonight is like, we do have an answer. We know how you create this like massive non-linear social change, and that's getting together with people who agree with you and organizing things that are going to rattle the system. Like, as we're talking, Orla, who's in Ireland, she's 19 and she broke her bail conditions and put paint all over a government department building, and she's been imprisoned for over a month now. I think what we need to do is like find that strength within ourselves and within our networks to organize big things that are going to, like, you know, however, like, either we're going to make the change by doing that, or it's like when there's loads of people on the street, then the government says, okay, we've got to change things because they're afraid of what we can do, basically. So yeah, get organized, probably.
Brilliant, Indigo. And Bill, final thoughts?
Oh, for crying out loud, this is so huge. I can't even believe you ask these sorts of questions. Now, I'm only half joking, but you know, I think we have to hold a lot of complex and sometimes conflicting realities at the same time. The urgency and the capacity to grow from the power we have to the power we need. In the environmental justice community that my allies there, they talk about moving at the speed of trust. That can be something, honestly, that can be frustrating, you know, because of the urgency that Michael is talking about. There was a Zen story about someone coming into the teacher and saying, the enemy's at the gate, disaster is imminent, and the guru says, you know, we must act slowly. You know, so like there's these conflicting impulses and needs that we actually have to act with. It's not just more. That's almost capitalist. We don't just respond with more. We kind of have to go deeper, I think. And I think that we also have to go broader. And so instead of thinking that the only kind of change agents is as activists, what if we start celebrating the community organizer change agents, the people who are doing culture work around anti-racism or connecting to place, and celebrate them as change agents? And what if we celebrate all the people who are like farmers or doing solutionary stuff and celebrate them as change agents? And the storytellers like yourself and people who are doing, and Joe, who are doing these, helping us tell the story in a bigger way, celebrate them as change agents. I think then our movement becomes bigger. I also think we should find things that unlikely allies, and that's why I love railroad stuff, and I'm doing a lot of stuff around our solutionary rail project. But you all have a high-speed rail project where you've got tree sitters in a conservative farmer's, you know, the person's land, and you know, I think that those are opportunities to say, hey, we don't necessarily need to go faster. No, actually, we need to slow down. you know, and we need to connect to a place and connect to each other, because social movement power, moral warfare, our capacity to win this is all about relationships and making a material difference in people's lives about the things that they love. And I would just say that in terms of like a paradigm battle, I think we need to keep looking to Indigenous folks in their leadership around the planet for what are they doing, what are they calling on, what are they calling for, and how are they celebrating the sacred. And yeah, so, and then, you know, we have to say things like nationalize the fossil fuel industry and give those people all a pension and stop the production. You know, we need to talk about, I think we need to talk about nationalizing railroads in the US. You all are starting to redo that. So that kind of stuff, but that's tactical. All right, enough from me.
Thank you. Right, we've got to wrap up now because of time. It's been, I found it a very exciting panel. I also really hope this is the beginning of something rather than the wrap up of something, because also you had Adji, you had Miriam. We've got so many people like Adji and Miriam in our movement. You know, everybody that I saw in the film, I could give you 4 or 5 people that I know in the rebellion, and so our hearts are doing things that are really the same, and I think we can draw strength from knowing that we're going at it in the same way around the world. So this has been recorded. So just for anybody who's still there, maybe it's just us on the panel, maybe everybody else has gone, but just tell people they can still buy tickets to see the film, and they get to see a recording of this panel discussion for people who might be interested. I might try and coerce some of my non-believing family to try and watch it or something like that. I would like to extend huge thanks to everybody for being on the panel this evening and for giving us the benefit of your wisdom and your time. It's been really energizing. And what I want to finish with and wrap up with, well, 2 things. One thing, I saw a brilliant tweet the other day, can't claim it as mine, but it just said, remember friends, if you want to have a smaller carbon footprint, stop using fossil fuels. And it was just like, oh yeah, that's how to do it. That's the secret. And then what I'm going to close with is something that in XR we used to read at the beginning of all of our meetings. I don't know if people still do it now, but it seems to be happening less in my meetings. But I think it's brilliant. And so I'm going to just finish with our vision reminder, because I think we've got to center ourselves and we've got to get ready for what we're going to do this year, because this is it, right? This is it. And yes, we need to go deeper, and yes, we need to go further, but there's everything to play for here. We cannot lose. So I will say this: let us take a moment to consider why we are here. Let's recall our love for the whole of humanity in all corners of the world. Let's remember our love for this beautiful planet that feeds, nourishes, and sustains all life. Let's recollect our sincere desire to protect all this for now and for generations to come. As we act today, may we find the courage to bring this sense of peace and appreciation to everyone we encounter, to every word we speak, and to every action we make. In this emergency, together, we are all we need. Thank you, everyone.